also still have right here in the Central Texas area. We're now joined, and always one of the best things I ever did was reach out to Dan Luss, sports law attorney, on all of the various networks and radio and whatever else, TV, at New York Law School. Detrimental, the podcast that he does as a host on Sikkim 365 Radio, 365 Sports. So how much of you, I've seen it on your line, the timeline of Brian Flores, how much of what he actually is accusing the NFL would hold up in the court of law?
First of all, pleasure to join you guys. I think that's the question that people are getting to. What Brian Flores is saying, let's say he says 10 allegations in the complaint. Not all of the allegations in the complaint are directly tied to a racial discrimination lawsuit. That's what I think people are kind of losing sight of. Stephen Ross, the owner of the Miami Dolphins, he's the subject of a pretty loaded allegation that he paid or offered to pay Brian Flores $100,000 per loss. And the sentiment was, hey, we're trying to get a better draft pick. You should lose on purpose. I mean, even if you find me a check that says from Stephen Ross to Brian Flores, $100,000, that doesn't prove or disprove, right? Racial discrimination is a separate allegation. So, Dave, the way you asked the question, there's a lot of things in this complaint that we call in the law red herrings that are distractions to the actual issues. A lot of stuff about John Gruden, Colin Kaepernick, Caldwell. Question that I'm really curious in is, do we think that Brian Flores has a strong legal claim, right? There's a lot of noise around him. But yeah, I think it's at heart of hearts, it's a discrimination case. Was he discriminated against in terms of his hiring for the New York Giants, in terms of his firing for the Miami Dolphins, in terms of the interview with the Denver Broncos? I think that's a much different issue than is being framed right now on sports media.
Is the key witness in this thing, and I say this, know the answer, is it Bill Belichick kind of saying, yes, I know I sent a text to the wrong person?
Depends who you ask. There are people in the legal world as well. Maybe I'm in the minority. I'm not sure. I call it like I see it. I don't know what other people are saying. People are saying that Bill Belichick, right, in the sports media, that Bill Belichick's his main witness because of this text message, which I'm sure you guys have gone over. He tries to send a text to Brian Daboll, allegedly. That's what these texts purport to be. And the text goes to Brian Flores, and it's congratulating basically Daboll on getting the job before Flores is going to interview. So the big question, right, from a legal perspective, who is Bill Belichick, right? Bill Belichick's the head coach of the New England Patriots. How does he know what the New York Giants are doing? And, unless he's John Mara, or the owner of the team of the Giants, he can't really bind. Bill Belichick's statement that Daboll had already been selected can't bind the Giants in a court of law. And that's what the Giants' statement was that came out yesterday, that we were considering Brian Flores up until the 11th hour, a.k.a. we hadn't made a decision on Daboll. Whoever's telling you that is not right. So, yeah, I see why people think that Belichick is very important here, but the law says that Belichick can't bind the Giants, who he doesn't work for. He's not an agent. He has no affiliation with them. So I don't think Belichick is going to be such a pivotal case once discovery bears itself out.
What is the next step here, Dan?
The NFL's MO always, right? They did it in the Gruden case about 2 weeks ago. Move to dismiss and move the case to arbitration. So they'll try to get this knocked out of the court of public, make it a public spectacle. Right now the case is in the Southern District of New York. You get the case away from the courthouse, maybe there's less eyeballs on it, but also you try to get the case dismissed. So people will read into the fact that the NFL is moving to dismiss to hide, discovery, which maybe is part of it, but the NFL always moves to dismiss. So yeah, that's certainly the next phase here.
Dan, it's interesting because the part about games being like a bonus for losing games, that to me, and I understand the angst and all of that, of frustration when racism is a part of it. I get all that, but to me, was that shocking to you that he does he have? Do you think he has evidence that he was going to get $100,000?
Well, Hugh Jackson said it about the Browns, and then you have Flores saying it about the Dolphins as well. So that's two coaches who have alleged what the bribery act, right, Dan?
That's like gambling 101. The worst thing that's to me 10 times worse.
Well, I guess a little bit of legalese here, right? Hugh Jackson, I think he said it on a radio show, or he said it on Twitter. That's one thing. Flores is saying that in a legal document sworn under penalty of perjury. So, if you lie under oath, if your attorney lies under oath, there's certainly sanctions, right? There's a lot more ramifications for doing that. That's why I think at this stage there's a little bit more credibility in Flores' comments. Not to say that I think Jackson is lying, but Jackson's not going to put it under sworn oath. Then it's a little bit of a different story. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly out there. But I think, Dave, you asked me if I was surprised by that. Call it, I don't know what the right necessarily phrasing is this, but like, it doesn't have anything to do with the lawsuit. So if they put it out in a press release, I don't know, maybe people don't think it's as serious, but I think the lawsuit has done an effective job at kind of tweaking the public sentiment on this case. Like, oh, wow, look at the smoking gun, the Belichick text message, and Stephen Ross bribing him. Brian Flores is going to win his case. Whereas neither of those two things really prove the case. And the bribing has nothing to do with the racial part. So it's two separate issues, obviously big issues, two big obstacles the NFL is going to have to deal with. But yeah, separate issues.
If Brian Flores is going to win this case, does he need maybe some other people to join this lawsuit?
I think so. If you ask me, and you guys know I'm in the weeds of football, Brian Daboll, the guy that was hired by the New York Giants, was an A-level coaching candidate, as was Brian Flores. So it's going to be a tough sell to say, hey, I didn't get the Giants job because of some type of racial undertones. I mean, Brian Daboll was a hot coaching candidate, as was Brian Flores. So that's one thing, right? But there are a number of plaintiffs or potential plaintiffs, ex-head coaches in the NFL, Jim Caldwell being one of them, who was fired from I believe the Colts. He had an 11-5 season. Was also let go from the Detroit Lions. And other Detroit Lions coaches have since got a little bit more of a leash. Caucasian coaches. So I think there are other coaches here and general managers that might have some better claims, but we'll see. I mean, this is what a class action is. You're going to invite other plaintiffs to come to the table and kind of give you strength in numbers. So we could have tens, if not hundreds, of coaches that join the class. I mean, that's certainly possible.
There are coaches who have made plenty of accusations, but how much does the fear of that Brian Flores might be doing a Curt Flood-esque thing here keep people away from joining that class action suit? So
that's the question, right? There's a guy like Jim Caldwell. I think he's been out of football for 2 years. So there's certainly going to be some guys that have retired that I don't think will be concerned. But, we'll see, right? There's this interesting, interplay right now. Flores has not withdrawn his name from the New Orleans Saints head coaching vacancy. He's interviewing for it, and same with the Houston Texans. So I'm hearing from people in Houston that at least he was considered to be the front runner for that job. So interesting, right? If you're the lawyer for Brian Flores, maybe you had a conversation and said, hey, maybe we should wait to file this lawsuit until we see how these jobs go. If you get them, maybe you reconsider the lawsuit. And if you get them, maybe that actually helps our case, that you didn't get any job despite being the top one of, if not the top coaching candidates on the market. So, yeah, that certainly will add another level of intrigue, how those jobs shake out. Those have yet to be determined as of today. Is
he the NFL version now of what could be Curt Flood back in the 70s with free agency?
I think so. It depends, right? It depends if he makes his way back. Curt Flood never played again, and neither did Colin Kaepernick. So, I don't know. It's this weird. It'd be very strange if you told me at the beginning of this coaching cycle that Flores would never coach again in the NFL. But I don't know. I mean, I'm speaking to people that say you can't rule that out. If he does, right? Curt Flood was kind of the sympathetic figure because the guy never played again. Probably had stats that were trending towards potentially a Hall of Fame guy. We'll see. I mean, you certainly can't rule it out at this stage.
So you mentioned all the different facets that he threw in that. If he is suing for racial discrimination, what does anything come of some of those other things, like the tanking for the loss or the Broncos showing up drunk or whatever?
The Broncos, yes. I still don't. Somebody can convince me otherwise. I don't see how the tanking factors in. I think my understanding and reading of the complaint is that the Dolphins' racial element is because he got fired after having a good season. And I think, I remember the day when he got fired, sports Twitter and, media would just say this is an egregious firing. What did he do to get fired? So that's kind of one. The Broncos one, I'm not sure if I'm necessarily buying it. The fact that someone kind of shows up unprepared and disheveled for an interview means that they had no interest in hiring the candidate. I think that's a little bit of a tough sell. But, here's the bottom line, right? This case, it has to just survive a motion to dismiss, and then it'll get into discovery, which will allow Brian Flores to poke around and maybe get some emails, just like John Gruden is looking for in his case, just like they're looking for in the Washington football case, emails to connect the dots. There's a saying in the law, guys, it's what you can prove. It's not what you know. We can look at the NFL and say there's a diversity problem, that there's one NFL head coach that's African American. There's 6 general managers out of 32 that are African American. But it's Brian Flores and the plaintiffs in this case. It's their burden to show that those numbers are what they are because of discrimination, which is a high burden, right? So I don't think anyone can tell you one way or the other who's going to win this case, but I do think there's enough to get into discovery, and then you can peek behind the curtain and see maybe there's some crazy John Gruden smoking emails back there.
I was going to ask you about John Gruden, Dan. Where is that case, that fight? Where is that timeline right now? John Gruden versus the NFL.
So it's that next level I told you guys about. He's filed, the NFL has filed a motion to dismiss and move it to arbitration. That's certainly, we'll see what comes of it. It's sitting in front of a judge right now in Las Vegas. No decision as of yet. But and I think the other one I mentioned, the Washington Commanders. Now they just changed their name. There's supposed to be a congressional hearing tomorrow. So those 3 cases I mentioned, I didn't do it by accident. They're all seeking the same emails. They're seeking what's going on behind the scenes. So I think the NFL has got a lot to be worried about from an optics perspective. I think the emails or emails, right, are going to come out that might not paint the NFL in the best light.
It's a crazy time, Dan. It's a good time to be an attorney. Of course, It always is, it seemed like to me. But your role in sports law and all of the stories you think about in the last just a couple of years since we got to know you is it's unbelievable. It seems like this one thing after another.
I'll take it. Some of the stories are fun. Some of them, like this one, are very serious. But it helps to have a JD nowadays. So always appreciate the call, guys.
Hey, anytime, Dan. Thank you so much, Dan Lust at Sports Law Lust on Twitter. It is an incredible follow, and he also has a podcast that is great to watch at Con Detrimental. He teaches. He's at New York Law School, and he's part of ESPN, SiriusXM, CBS, Fox Sports, all of those. And he is, again, a professor at the New York Law School.
Yeah, and I think we started talking to him, or you did, like probably before most of those places that you just listed off. He's really risen, and it's been great to see that. And you listen to him; it's very informative. He's just fun to listen to and learn from. And I didn't really think about that, but then he spit out those other 2 cases, and you think about between the Flores and then the Washington might be the messiest of all of them, and then the Gruden Raiders deal. I mean, my gosh, the NFL and being a sports law attorney right now, that's a good gig because there's plenty of stuff to talk about.
The NFL is very, very good at making things go away.
Yeah, very mafia-like.
And what's funny is that they've picked their battles on when to be righteous. They instead of picking picking the battle on racism, which would have made them look better in the long run, they picked it on deflated footballs.
Yeah,
like that's what they dragged out
or Bountygate or whatever
for all this time. Like this is the integrity of the game. Well, what about the integrity of the humanity of the people involved? Like and every time they get pushed into a corner to make a stand on something, like, you know what I got for you? Listen, this will work. People love it. We're gonna on the back of the helmet, we're gonna say end racism. It's a slow burn, but it'll work. Instead of like, hey, let's just address, and it's not even about the Rooney Rule. Like, sit down and address, like, why are you not? Like, just ask. But
we have people who are supposedly running our country in Congress that can't do that.
No, I know. So, but
the NFL's worried about one thing: eyeballs and dollars.
No, they're worried about the shield.
Yeah, well,
which goes hand in hand.
And this is interesting because Roger Dodger on our chat room, ESPN doesn't have enough. Oh no, it's good. I'm reading it wrong. Roger, the bonus to lose games just makes the NFL seem like pro wrestling and fake. And you know what? Would it surprise me if they did that in Cleveland or in Miami or whatever? The NBA had tanking. They learned how to tank. That was the league that basically where the phrase came from. And then they had the lottery. Now, they'd always kind of had that, but then they even weighted it even differently. And I don't know if it's stopped tanking or not. No. But if you have Tim Duncan coming out and you're like 3 games ahead of somebody else for the worst record, you want to keep losing. But the NFL is about parity. So tanking, you are going to get the first pick. There is no lottery. So you have 2 teams that end up 2-14 and 3-13. 2-14 gets the first pick unless they traded it.
It also makes more sense in basketball where there are years where there's a transcendent player like a Tim Duncan that can change it. Like this guy can change the franchise. Football, there's not. I mean, there's not really that many guys that you know
there
that
are
you could
franchise
tank for and get
quarterbacks, but not all of them have been that. They haven't all ended up that way.
Because it's much more about just the individual athlete. It's got to be the right team. It's got to be the right coach. It's got to be the right offense. It's got to be the right defense. It's got to be the right role players around you. It's got to be a lot of things. If you're just a great individual basketball player, you can still go out there on a nightly basis and be a great individual basketball player. Your team might not be as good, but in football, look at Trevor Lawrence. Bad ownership, bad coach, bad players around him. He's not that great either. But he was the most sure, Trevor freaking Lawrence. Let's tank for Trevor, right? How many teams were trying to do that last year? And for what? He's in a bad spot. So that's the big difference between the one stud player in the NBA draft versus the one stud player in the NFL. Is you got to have all the other ducks in a row as well. And you do to a smaller extent in the NBA. You got to have a good enough coach. You got to have some guys around him. But Luka goes to the Mavericks, and they're still not a great team by any means, but he makes them massively better and more interesting. Trevor Lawrence hasn't changed anything for Jacksonville. At all, because they have a bad ownership group.
Also shows not yet. Joe Burrow's first year won.
Also shows you what a crap owner Stephen Ross is, if that's true, and that he didn't realize this, and that, look, if you have a top 5 pick, you're probably going to get one of the best players.
Yeah.
Whether it's number 1 or whatever, and the quarterbacks are as big a crapshoot as anything else, because you can. I'm almost more nervous drafting a quarterback than I would drafting a defensive end, because a defensive end doesn't need 5 guys in front of him to keep him from getting killed. He goes to get to kill the guy. He can maybe be better.
Mike Mamula would disagree.
No, I know, but Mike Mamula is a combine warrior.
I know.
But if I'm taking the top 5, I'm like, you know what? I'd rather have Aiden Hutchinson than Matt Corral, just because I'm pretty sure that I don't have to worry about everybody else around Aiden Hutchinson as much as I do making sure the quarterback's good. The reason that RG3 is out of the NFL right now is due in large part to the fact that Washington didn't realize this about it. We're going to get the quarterbacks and be fine. Well, you've got 2 offensive linemen that are free agents after his rookie year, and they're both walking. Then you have other guys that are going to retire and move on, and then you get to a second year,
that's
hurt,
why
and they're not good.
You just set the table for why it's even more frustrating if you're a Cowboys fan, which I'm not, but we cover the hell out of them. They had the offensive line and still screwed up, not being able to find a way to the next level. All right, so that's the Brian Flores story. The Redskins